Hi everyone, welcome back to That Mom. Today we have a very special guest, Miss Elsie Grace. We are going to talk about her birth story. Little Miss Elsie joined us on October 2nd and she weighed 8 pounds, 7 ounces and she was 20 and a half inches long. My delivery, from the time I went to the hospital till the time she was born was only about 4 hours. I probably waited a little bit too long to go to the hospital. My contractions were only like 2 to 3 minutes apart by the time we got there. I had been walking all day and keeping track, and I really didn't want to get sent home, so I wanted to make sure that I was actually in labor. And so when I got there, I was a 6, and she was born at 8:23 p.m. I did have an epidural. I actually really enjoy my epidural. I had one with my first one, but I got it really late this time. By the time I got it, I was getting it, they checked me and I was ready to push. And so even though it seemed like that would be pointless, it ended up being great because I had a partial placental abruption, and kind of at the last minute, the last about 15 minutes of pushing, it became urgent for me to get her out. They actually ended up vacuuming her out. And so I think it was probably good I had an epidural because I was able to really focus on pushing more and not have as much pain. So she came out, and unfortunately she had ingested some of my placenta. So she ended up, she was born, she was purple. They put her on me. I didn't really notice. I know it seems so ignorant, but because it's your baby and you're like, oh, they're so sweet. And babies, they look a little crazy when they're first born. They have all that stuff all over them. But she ended up being taken straight to the NICU. And so I sent my husband, Julian, straight over there. I said, I'll be fine. My mom and dad were with me. I told him not to leave her. I was like, do not leave her. I want someone there with her all the time, praying over her and just being with her. So he went, and he ended up coming back a little bit after that because they couldn't get an IV in her. And so they needed to have a sterile area so no one else could be in there because they were going to put it in her umbilical cord, so through her belly button. But unfortunately, the NICU at the hospital we delivered at doesn't sustain that type of IV for more than a few hours. So they had informed us that if they didn't get her IV either in her foot or in her arm in the next few hours, that they would have to take her to another NICU, like a higher level NICU across town. I knew they'd be able to get it. I really just felt like the Lord was like, it's going to be fine. You're not going to have to go anywhere. But I had already told Julian that I hadn't been discharged. So I told him that if they ended up taking her, to just go with her. I would be fine, that my top priority was her. And so I had a little bit of trauma after. I had a lot of stitching. I ended up passing out just from the blood loss of the placental abruption and throwing up. But after a few hours, I was doing a lot better, and I went ahead and walked myself over to the NICU. And they got an IV in her arm, which was such a blessing, but unfortunately it infiltrated her arm, and so they had to remove it, and they finally got one in her foot. So she ended up having her IV in her foot for the 4 days that she was there. So she spent 4 days in the NICU, which was really so unexpected. It was very, very hard and challenging because you don't have a lot of answers. You don't really know what's going to happen, but we were very fortunate that it was only a few days. It felt like forever, but it was really just a very sad time, even just being in there and hearing all the babies cry. But really just my heart is definitely for any parents who their kiddos go to the NICU. It's just such a hard and scary time because you don't know what's going to happen, and your baby is just so little and so helpless. And but they're so amazingly resilient, these little ones. They have all this stuff all over them. She had a CPAP machine on, so over her nose, and she had this headband, and then she had a tube down her throat into her stomach to clear out the placenta that she had swallowed. And then that's how she got food for the first 24 hours, was through this little syringe that they put in through her belly. So she came home 4 days later, and you would have never known after that. She was a pretty big baby. She still is a pretty big baby. But what was what the part of the story, I mean, of course, any baby is always a miracle, but the miracle for us was that we had tried to have a baby for 1.5 years before we got pregnant. And as many of you probably know, that it can be so defeating when you're trying to have a baby and you're just getting negative pregnancy test after negative pregnancy test. And so we got pregnant about 1.5 years after trying. We had had 1 miscarriage before that, so we had gotten pregnant once before. But on October 2nd of 2017, we actually walked out of the hospital, same hospital that we delivered her at, with the news that we had lost that pregnancy. And so when we went into labor on October 2nd, 2018, I knew that that was just so God's promise of that we would have another baby. And something that he put on my heart, especially to share with you guys, is that a delay is not a denial. So if, like us, you're trying, you maybe have even been trying for so much longer. We have friends who have tried for several years to have kiddos, that a delay is not a denial if you're still waiting. And so it was such a beautiful thing for us that on the same day that we found out we had lost a pregnancy, that Elsie was born. And it was just kind of watching it come full circle, God's promise to us. And so, yeah, she's our little miracle baby, little Missy. She's very resilient after her little stay in the NICU. And 7 weeks later, here she is, nice and healthy. So if you're struggling with any type of infertility or you've been trying to have a baby, just let me know if you're comfortable in the comments below, or know that I'm praying for you, that my heart is for you, and that God sees you, and that just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that it won't. I hope to see you again soon, and I'll catch you later. Bye, guys.